Hello students, today we are going to start with another head of income, that is income from other sources. Okay, this is one of the simplest head of income that we are going to study. Okay, income from other sources is given under chapter number 4 under unit number 5, income from other sources, on page number 4.474. I hope this is quite clear. The PDF of the ICS study material is available for download from the ICIS website. If you don't know how to download from the ICIS website, don't worry, the link of this PDF is given in the description below. Okay, so now let's come back to our notes. These notes that you are seeing right now on your screen are also available for download. The notes are given in the Telegram group. The link for the Telegram group is given in the description below. So basically what we are going to study in this chapter, income from other sources, we are going to study how to identify whether a particular income will fall under this head, income from other sources, and also we are going to study some of the exemption which is given under section 10. I hope this is quite clear to you all. Okay, so now let's start with our chapter income from other sources, and the very first section that we are going to study under this chapter income from other sources is section 56 subsection 2, gift. Okay, so understand in layman term, if an assessee is there, okay, and he receives the gift from someone, so whether this gift will be taxable to such assessee or not, that is what we are going to study in this section 56 subsection 2. I hope this is quite clear to you. Okay, so basically let's understand first kind of a gift, that is gift of money. If an assessee receives a gift of money from these people, that is Ram D Hatley Ji, so in order to remember the list of people, there is an acronym Ram D Hatley Ji. Okay, if you remember this acronym, you will automatically remember the list of the people from which an assessee, if he receives a gift of money, then whatever amount of gift of money that assessee has received, that will be fully exempt. So let's understand what is this list of people. Okay, so basically Ram D Hatley Ji means R stands for relative, okay, U stands for university institution given under section 10 subsection 23C, M stands for marriage, D stands for debt contemplation, H stands for hospital and medical institution, T stands for trust and charitable institution as per section 12A and 12AA, L stands for local authorities, I stands for inheritance will given under section 47. This section 47 we will study under income from capital gain head. Okay, G stands for gift from holding company to subsidiary company or vice versa, and 10 stands for miscellaneous, that is the government will describe the class of person and subject to such condition as may be prescribed. So even if you don't remember this, but it is okay, you have to remember this Ram D Hatley Ji. Okay, so understand now, if an assessee receive a gift of money from this Ram D Hatley Ji, so basically understand in parts now, if an assessee receives a gift of money from the relative, then whatever amount of gift that has been received by the assessee, that will be fully exempt. I hope this is quite clear. Okay, so now let's understand the meaning of the relative. The meaning of the relative is given at the end of the page. Okay, so basically this is our assessee. He is having this all people as his relative. Okay, so let's understand. Assessee's brother as well as the brother's spouse will be considered as the assessee's relative. Assessee's sister, okay, as well as sister's spouse will also be considered as assessee's relative. Okay, assessee's father will be considered as assessee's relative. Assessee's mother will also be considered as assessee's relative. Assessee's grandparents will also be considered as assessee's relative. Assessee's spouse will be considered as assessee's relative. Assessee's kids will also be considered as assessee's relative. Assessee's kid's wife, that is the spouse, will also be considered as the assessee's relative. Okay, the spouse is having her father, her mother, okay, her brother, her sister, okay, the brother plus spouse, okay, and sister plus spouse, this all people will also be considered as assessee's relative. I hope this is quite clear. So assessee is having the father, okay, the father is having brother and brother spouse, these both people will be considered as assessee's relative. Father is there and father is having a sister and sister plus spouse, this both people will also be considered as the assessee's relative. Okay, assessee's mother, okay, is having a brother, okay, that means the brother and the spouse of the mother of the assessee will be considered as the relative. Okay, it sounds little confusing, but if you look at the chart, it will look very simple. Okay, then the assessee's mother is having a sister. Okay, so the sister and the spouse of the mother will be also the relative of the assessee. I hope this is quite clear. So understand in this manner. So for example, if the assessee receives the gift from his brother, okay, then whatever amount of gift, that means the money gift that has been received by the assessee, will be fully exempt. Okay, and one more example we will understand. If the assessee is receiving a gift of money from the grandparents, okay, then whatever money gift that has been received by the assessee will be fully exempt. I hope this is quite clear to you. U stands for university and institution. So if an assessee receives a gift of money from an university or a institution, then whatever the amount of gift has been received by the assessee will be fully exempt. Okay, so assessee is getting married. During the marriage, okay, M stands for marriage, right? So during the marriage, whatever gift of money that has been received by the assessee will be fully exempt. I hope this is quite clear. Okay, D stands for death contemplation. So what is death contemplation? This is assessee. Okay, assessee is having some relative. Okay, this relative is dying. When he is dying, he has said that whatever money he has, he wants to give it as a gift to the assessee. So whatever money gift has been received by the assessee when this relative was dying, okay, will be considered as death contemplation gift, and the gift of money will be fully exempt. I hope this is quite clear to you all. Okay, H stands for hospital and medical institution. So if an assessee receives a cash gift, that is a gift of money from a hospital or a medical institution, it will be considered as fully exempt. Okay, it won't be taxable. I hope this is quite clear. T stands for trust and charitable purpose. There is a possibility that this assessee has received a gift of money, okay, from the trust or charitable institution. Then whatever amount of gift of money that the assessee has received will be fully exempt. L stands for local authority. If an assessee receives a gift of money from the local authority, okay, then whatever amount of gift the assessee has received will be fully exempt. I stands for inheritance or will. Inheritance or will simply means that parents are there, okay. Parents have created property as well as money. Whatever the money they have earned, they will transfer it to the child, okay. Whatever money has been received by this child, which is our assessee, then this gift of money will be 100% exempt. That is what it is given over here. I hope this is quite clear. G stands for gift given by a subsidiary company to a holding company, or a holding company to a subsidiary company will be fully exempt. And the gift is gift of money. I hope this is quite clear. So I'll not read the acronym what I have done right now for all the gifts, okay. I hope you all have understood how to read this particular acronym, okay. Relative, universities, institutions. M stands for marriage. D stands for death contemplation. H stands for hospitals and medical institution. T stands for trust and charitable trust. L stands for local authority. I stands for inheritance and will. G stands for gift given to a subsidiary company by a holding company, or gift received by a holding company from a subsidiary company, okay. Then the whatever gift of money has been received will be fully exempt. I hope it is quite clear. But if a gift of money if is received by the assessee other than this people, okay, that is what it is written here, others, then aggregate up to rupees 50,000 per annum will be fully exempt. That means this gift has been received from a friend, okay. The gift of rupees 10,000 is received from a friend, and from one more friend a gift of rupees 60,000 has been received. So this aggregate is crossing 50,000, okay, is crossing 50,000. I hope this is quite clear. So since 70,000 gift of money has been received from a people other than this, then it won't fall under this. I hope this is quite clear. So it will fall under this category, that is otherwise taxable on aggregate value. That means 70,000 of gift total that has been received by the assessee will be fully taxable under income from other sources. But if the assessee would have received only 40,000 or say 50,000, okay, then whatever amount the assessee has received up to 50,000 would be fully exempt if it is received from any other people other than this people. I hope this is quite clear to you all. So let's revise this. I know this is quite complicated. Once you have understood this part, then there are other gifts also that we will understand automatically, okay. That time I don't need to invest as much time as I have invested in this first point. I hope this is quite clear to you all. So gift of money, if it is received from relative, university or institution, or during marriage, or due to death contemplation, or from an hospital or a medical institution, or from a trust or a charitable institution, or from a local authority, or from an inheritance or a will, or a gift has been given by a subsidiary company to a holding company, or a holding company has given a gift to a subsidiary company, then whatever gift of money has been transferred to the assessee, okay, will be fully exempt. I hope this is quite clear. But if the gift of money is received by the assessee from any of the people other than this, okay, then aggregate up to rupees 50,000 per annum will be fully exempt. Otherwise, that means more than 50,000 of gift of money if received by the assessee, that means otherwise, then the entire amount will be taxable on aggregate value. That means earlier I told you an example of 70,000. That means you won't get a benefit of 50,000. Okay, you will say no, we will get this 50,000 benefit. No, that is not the case. On aggregate amount, on aggregate 70,000, the tax will be calculated, and this 70,000 will be considered as income from other sources. I hope this is quite clear to you all. So now let's move on to the next gift. The next gift is the gift of movable property. Okay, what is this movable property? We need to understand firstly what is this movable property. Movable property includes B SADA PJ. Okay, this is an acronym to remember the list of movable property. So the acronym is B SADA PJ. B stands for bullion, S stands for shares and securities, second S stands for sculpture, A stands for artwork, D stands for drawing, A stands for archaeological collection, P stands for painting, J stands for jewelry. I hope this is quite clear to you all by now. So if an assessee is receiving a gift of movable property, that is B SADA PJ, and such gift is received from Ram D Hatley Ji, then whatever gift has been received of a movable property by this assessee will be fully exempt. I hope this is quite clear. But if this gift of movable property has been received by a people other than Ram D Hatley Ji, then aggregate up to rupees 50,000 per annum will be fully exempt. But if aggregate is more than 50,000, that is otherwise, then the whatever amount of gift has been received of a movable property by this assessee then will be considered in the total income of the assessee and will be taxable on the aggregate value. I hope this is quite clear to you all. Okay, so now let's understand the last gift, the gift of an immovable property. Immovable property simply means flat lands. Okay, I hope this is very much clear to you. What does immovable property means? If a gift of immovable property is received from Ram D Hatley Ji, then whatever a gift of immovable property has been received from these people, that will be fully exempt to the assessee. I hope this is quite clear. But a gift of immovable property is received from a people other than this Ram D Hatley Ji, then aggregate up to rupees 50,000 per annum will be fully exempt. I hope this is quite clear. But if a gift of immovable property has been received from other than this Ram D Hatley Ji people, then the aggregate value, that means any amount that has been received in a form of immovable property above this 50,000, the aggregate value of the gift will be considered and it will be taxable. I hope this is quite clear to you all. I hope you all understood this section, that is section 56 subsection 2 gift. So let's revise the entire section and let's revise all the acronym as well as the meaning of the relative. So section 56 subsection 2 gift says that gift of money if received from Ram D Hatley Ji, then it is fully exempt, but if received by otherwise, then aggregate up to rupees 50,000 per annum will be fully exempt, otherwise taxable on aggregate value. I hope this is quite clear. So the next gift is gift of movable property. What does movable property means? Movable property means B SADA PJ. B stands for bullion, S stands for shares and security, S2 stands for sculpture, A stands for artwork, D stands for drawing, A stands for archaeological collection, P stands for painting, J stands for jewelry. If this gift of movable property is received from Ram D Hatley Ji, it is fully exempt. But if the gift of movable property is received from other than this Ram D Hatley Ji, then aggregate up to rupees 50,000 per annum is fully exempt, but otherwise taxable on aggregate basis. I hope this is quite clear. So the next gift is gift of immovable property. If a gift of immovable property is received from Ram D Hatley Ji, then it is fully exempt. Okay, but if a gift of immovable property is received other than this Ram D Hatley Ji, then aggregate up to rupees 50,000 per annum is fully exempt, otherwise taxable on aggregate value. I hope this is quite clear. Ram D Hatley Ji's R stands for relative, U stands for university, institution given under section 10 subsection 23C, M stands for marriage, D stands for debt contemplation, H stands for hospital and medical institution, T stands for trust and charitable institution given under section 12A and 12AA, L stands for local authorities, I stands for inheritance will given under section 47, G stands for gift from holding company to subsidiary company or vice versa. Okay, and what does relative means? Relative means all these people. Okay, so in order to remember the relative, you remember this chart. Okay, automatically you will come to know what does relative means. I hope this is quite clear to you all. Okay, so now let's study this list. With the help of this list, we will identify the income which falls under the head income from other sources. Okay, so the very first income which falls under the head income from other sources is employees. This is employees contribution towards staff welfare scheme. Okay, if an employee who is working under an employer is making a contribution towards staff welfare scheme to this employer, then whatever this employee is contributing to the employer, it will be considered as income under the head income from other sources. I hope this is quite clear to you all. The second income that we are going to study, which is going to fall under the head income from other sources, is the interest income. Okay, and it is given as exemption under section 10 subsection 15. I hope this is quite clear to you all. So under this interest income, there is three categories: fully exempt under section 10 subsection 15, partly exempt under section 10 subsection 15, and fully taxable. Okay, so let's understand this fully exempt category. So basically an assessee may receive an interest income from a security, okay, from a bond, okay, or from keeping the money, that is depositing the money in the bank. Okay, so this all are the securities on which the assessee will receive an interest. Okay, and whatever interest the assessee will receive on these securities will be exempt under section 10 subsection 15. I hope this is quite clear to you all. So if an assessee has invested in a bonds of IRFCL, that is Indian Railway Financial Corporation Limited, or if the assessee has invested in the bonds of NHAI, that is National Highway Authority of India, or if the assessee has invested in the bonds of RECL, that is Rural Electrification Corporation India, or if the assessee has invested in the bonds of HUDCL, that is Housing and Urban Development Corporation Limited, or if the assessee has invested in the bond of PFC, that is Power Financial Corporation, then whatever interest the assessee has received on this bond, okay, that will be exempt under section 10 subsection 15. I hope this is quite clear. Similarly, the next point says that if an assessee receives an interest on the security and this security is held by the welfare commissioner for the Bhopal gas victim in the Reserve Bank account under SL/DH048 account, okay, then whatever interest on this security has been received by the assessee will be fully exempt under section 10 subsection 15. I hope this is quite clear. The next point says that interest on gold deposit bonds issued under the gold deposit scheme. So if an assessee receives an interest on this gold deposit bond which is issued by the gold deposit scheme, okay, then whatever interest has been received by the assessee will be fully exempt under section 10 subsection 15. Okay, then the next in this point C only says that interest on deposit certificate under the gold monetization scheme. So if an assessee has invested in a deposit certificate under the gold monetization scheme, then whatever interest the assessee is receiving on this deposit certificate will be fully exempt under section 10 subsection 15. I hope this is quite clear. So the next point is point D. If an assessee receives an interest on a bond and these bonds are issued by whom? These bonds are issued by a local authority or a state pooled financed entity which are notified by the central government in official gazette, then whatever interest the assessee is earning on this bond will be fully exempt under section what? Under section 10 subsection 15. I hope this is quite clear. So the next point is point E. Point E says that if an assessee receives an interest income, okay, and such assessee is a non-resident from a unit located in an IFC. IFC stands for International Financial Service Center, in respect of any money borrowed from a non-resident on or after 1st April 2019, then whatever interest the assessee, that is the non-resident, is receiving will be exempt under section 10 subsection 15. I hope this is quite clear to you all. So you all don't need to memorize all this list of the securities. You just have to read it. In the exam, the question will provide the detail of the security. You just need to identify whether exemption under section 10 subsection 15 is available or not, and whether it is falling under the head income from other sources or not. I hope this is quite clear. So in this interest income only, that is under section 10 subsection 15, there is a next category, that is partly exempt category. So what is this partly exempt category says? If an assessee earns an interest income from a post office saving bank account, okay, then exemption up to rupees 3,500 is available in case of an individual account, but rupees 7,500 in case of a joint account. I hope this is quite clear to you all. Okay, it is quite self-explanatory. It is quite self-explanatory that if an assessee is receiving an interest income from a post office saving bank account, then the exemption is available up to rupees 3,500 in case of an individual account. Over and above this 3,500 will be considered as income from other sources. I hope this is quite clear. Or rupees 7,500 in case of a joint account, and over and above of the 7,500 will be considered as income from other sources. I hope this is quite clear. And fully taxable category says that interest from securities other than the securities mentioned over here. I hope this is quite clear to you all. For example, understand in this manner: interest from debentures, okay, in Reliance Limited. RL stands for Reliance Limited. So whatever interest that has been received by the assessee from this debentures which is holding in the Reliance Limited will be considered as fully taxable interest income under the head income from other sources. I hope this is quite clear to you all. Okay, so the next income that we are going to study is composite rent. What does composite rent means? Composite rent of a house property where furniture and other assets are not separable from the property, that is the house property. In other words, let's understand it as furnished house property. Then income from such furnished house property is not taken in income from house property head, but it is taken under the head income from other sources. Okay, so what it is, let's understand. Okay, so basically many of the times the people search for a furnished house property. Okay, so if an assessee is having a furnished house property, okay, and he is giving this furnished house property on rent, then whatever rent income this assessee is receiving from renting this furnished house property, the income will be calculated under the head income from other sources and not under the head income from house property. I hope this is quite clear to you all. And the next concept under this point number 3 is subletting of house property. So what does this subletting of house property means? Subletting of a house property means this is the assessee's house. Okay, assessee has given this house on rent to Mr. X. Okay, but Mr. X has got a job in US, but he does not want to leave this house property. He further gives this house property on rent to Mr. Y. This X gives the house property of this assessee to Y. Okay, on rent. So basically it is known as subletting of house property. That means the owner is not giving the house property on rent. Okay, then whatever income has been earned by the tenant, okay, the rent income that has been earned by the tenant from the other tenant will be considered as income from other sources and not income from house property. So let me take you all to income from house property chapter. There I have written one thing that I want to highlight to you all right now. So under section 22 we have studied this condition. In this condition we have studied point number 2, which says that assessee must be the owner of such house property in order to take this income under the head income from house property. Okay, I hope you all understood this now. So basically if the assessee has given his house property on rent to Mr. X, so Mr. X is not the owner of the house property. So if Mr. X is giving this house property on rent to Mr. Y, this Y is paying this X a rent income. Okay, so this rent income earned by X from Mr. Y will be considered as income from other sources and not income from house property. I hope this is quite clear to you all. So now let's move back to our income from other sources notes. Okay, now let's move on to our next point, that is point number 4, which says that income from renting of assets like plant and machinery, furniture or land will be fully taxable under income from other sources. Quite self-explanatory. I don't need to explain you this point. I hope this is quite clear to you all. Okay, so let's understand this point number 5. Point number 5 says that Keyman insurance policy amount received. Okay, so firstly let's understand what does Keyman means. Keyman means basically there is a business. Okay, in this business there is a particular person who is the main person who is running this business. So that is known as a key man. For example, in a company, a key man can be a CEO, a CFO, a director. Okay, so basically in a company, these people are known as key man. For these people, a insurance policy is taken for their health or for any reason. Okay, a policy has been taken by the company and something went wrong with these people. That means the CEO turned insane, the CFO died, or the director is missing. So these people were important to the business. Okay, so that's why they take a insurance policy. That's why the business takes the insurance policy. If anything happens to their key man, the business houses receive an amount from this insurance policy, that is a compensation amount from this insurance company. So whatever amount has been received by the business houses from this scheme and insurance policy will be fully taxable under the head income from other sources. That is what is given under the point number 5. I hope this is quite clear to you all. So let's move on to the next point, that is point number 6. Point number 6 says that fees from the board meeting received by the board of directors is fully taxable. So basically if a company is there and the board of directors are attending the board meeting, so whatever fees, that is the board fees, are received by the board of directors, then the fees that has been received by the board of directors, it will form part of the income from other sources of that board of directors. Okay, and such will be fully taxable. I hope this is quite clear to you all. Okay, so now let's move on to our next point, that is point number 7. Point number 7 says that agriculture income from the land located in India is fully exempt under section 10 subsection 1, and it forms part of income from other sources. Okay, but if an agriculture income from the land located outside India, then it will be fully taxable in India and it forms part of income from other sources. I hope this is quite clear and quite self-explanatory. Okay, let's move on to the next page. In point number 8, point number 8 says that dividend income, okay, dividend income received from a domestic company is exempt under section 10 subsection 34. Okay, but the maximum exemption is available up to rupees 10 lakh per annum, and the balance dividend will be taxable at the rate 10% as per section 115 BBDA. Okay, so let's understand it over here with an example. Okay, so this is our Reliance Industries Limited. Okay, RIL, Reliance Industries Limited. Okay, it is giving a dividend to our assessee Mr. X of rupees 20 lakhs. Okay, so this 20 lakhs is exempt under section 1034, but there is a partial exemption available. Okay, up to 10 lakhs section 1034 is applicable. Okay, so the balance dividend of 10 lakh will be taxable at the rate 10% as per section 115 BBDA. I hope this is quite clear to you all. If you want to copy this, you can copy this, pause the video and copy this. Okay, so I am erasing this. Okay, I hope you all have copied this. Okay, so I hope you have understood point number 8. Dividend income from a domestic company is exempt under section 1034, but this is what? This is a partial exemption. Okay, partial exemption up to rupees 10 lakh. That means dividend whatever has been received by an SSC up to 10 lakh, it is fully exempt. Over and above that will be taxable at the rate 10% as per section 115 BBDA. I hope this is quite clear to you all. So the next income in point number 9 is dividend income from a cooperative society and a foreign company. It will be fully taxable in India. I hope this is quite clear, and it will form part of income from other sources. I hope this is quite clear. Similarly, the balance dividend, which is not exempt under section 1034, will be taken in income from other sources. I hope this is quite clear. So what does point number 10 says? Point number 10 says if any income is received by an SSC from a unit of UTI, that is Unit Trust of India, and a mutual fund are fully exempt under section 1035. Okay, so basically what all incomes can be received from units of UTI or units of mutual fund? Two kinds of income can be received: interest income or capital gain income. Okay, so whatever income the assessee is receiving from the units of UTI or units of mutual funds, they are fully exempt under section 1035. I hope this is quite clear to you all. Okay, so now let's understand point number 11. Point number 11 says that if an assessee who has received the advance money and such advance money is forfeited by such assessee after 1st April 2014, so what will be the treatment? So there are two cases: before 1/4/2014 and after 1/4/2014. If an assessee who has received an advance money in order to sell his property, okay, to sell his property or capital asset, okay, then whatever amount he has forfeited, that means the advance money he has forfeited, will be reduced from the cost of acquisition if the advance money was received before 1st April 2014. But if the advance money which has been forfeited has been received after 1st April 2014, then the treatment will be, it will not be reduced from the cost of acquisition as per section 51, and the advance money which is received by the assessee will be fully taxable. I hope this is quite clear. So let's revise this point number 11. If the assessee who has received an advance money in order to sell a capital asset, okay, but such capital asset is not sold and such advance money is forfeited by the assessee, which is an income of the assessee, and such forfeition and the advance money has been received after 1st April 2014, then whatever advance money has been received by the assessee will be fully taxable under the head income from other sources. I hope this is quite clear to you all. Okay. Point number 12 says that if an assessee is receiving a royalty income, then whatever royalty income has been received by the assessee will be fully taxable under the head income from other sources. I hope this is quite clear to you all. Let's move on to our next point, that is point number 13. Point number 13 says that if an assessee receives an insurance compensation, okay, it is exempt under section 10 subsection 10D, and such insurance compensation if received from the LIC, then only the exemption under section 10 subsection 10D will be available to the assessee. I hope this is quite clear and quite self-explanatory. Okay, so now let's move on to our next point, that is point number 14. Point number 14 says that if an assessee earns a casual income, and the casual income means what? Casual income means betting on horse race income, or card game income, or a lottery income, or a gambling income, or a crossword puzzle winning income. Okay, such income, whatever the assessee has earned, okay, from betting on horse race, card game, lottery, gambling, crossword puzzle, it will be fully taxable under income from other sources. Okay, the tax rate is also given over here. Okay, so there is a special tax rate if an assessee is earning a casual income. So let's see what is that. If assessee is earning such winning incomes, okay, such will be chargeable to tax at the flat 30% tax rate under section 115BB. Okay, no basic exemption limit can be set off against this income. So what does this mean? Let's understand it on a blank page. Okay, so let's come on a blank page. Here is our assessee Mr. Vijay. Okay, so if this assessee Mr. Vijay is there, okay, he is earning income from betting on horse race. Okay, and he has earned a income of rupees 10 lakhs from this betting. Okay, so this Mr. Vijay firstly is an individual. Okay, and let's assume he is a resident, ordinary resident, and his age is 58 years. Okay, so this means that Mr. Vijay can take the benefit of type 1 slab. Okay, type 1 slab, that means 2,50,000 basic exemption limit. Okay, but since he is earning a casual income, this 2,50,000 basic exemption limit will not be available on this 10 lakh of income. Okay, but if this assessee Mr. Vijay would have earned a salary income of rupees 1 lakh, then this 1 lakh can be allowed as a basic exemption limit. Okay, so let's understand this. Okay, so this Mr. Vijay has earned income of salary of rupees 1 lakh. Okay, and income from other sources is 10 lakhs. So that means his total income, okay, is 11 lakhs. Okay, so on this 11 lakhs, basic exemption limit will be available only on this part. Okay, so up to 1 lakh only the basic exemption limit will be allowed, and on this 10 lakhs, okay, on this 10 lakhs the tax will be calculated at the rate 30%. So that is what is given under section 115BB. Okay, so let's revise that section again. The casual income, if earned by the assessee, and such casual income is in the form of betting of horse race, card games, lottery, gambling, crossword puzzle, then it will be fully taxable under the head income from other sources, and the tax rate for such income is flat 30% under section 115BB, and no basic exemption limit can be set off against this income. I hope this is quite clear. So now let's move on to our next income. Okay, the next income is given under point 15. In point 15, if an assessee is earning a family pension, okay, then normally exemption available is rupees 15,000 or 1/3 of the amount of the pension received. Okay, so this is basically a partial exemption, but here a section is not given. Okay, so you have to remember this as it is. If an assessee is receiving a family pension, there is a normal exemption, okay, not section 10 exemption. I hope this is quite clear. So that's why I've written over here normal exemption of rupees 15,000 or 1/3 of the amount of family pension, whichever is lower, will be allowed as partial exemption. I hope this is quite clear. Okay students, so let's move on to point number 16. Point number 16 says that if a family is receiving a family pension and such family pension is received due to a person who is a gallantry award winner, then whatever family pension has been received by that family will be fully exempt under section 1018. I hope this is quite clear to you all. So let's revise this 2 points again. If an assessee is receiving a family pension, then the normal exemption is available of rupees 15,000 or 1/3 of the amount received, whichever is lower. Okay. And in point number 16, the family pension, if it is received due to a person who is a gallantry award winner, then whatever family pension has been received by the family of such assessee or the assessee will be fully exempt under section 10 subsection 18. I hope this is quite clear. So let's move on to point number 17. Point number 17 says that family pension in case of armed forces who died during operation at duty is exempt under section 10 subsection 19. I hope this is quite clear to you all. It is quite self-explanatory. Okay, so let's move on to point number 18. Point number 18 says that income of a minor child, we have already studied this income of a minor child in the chapter known as income of the other person, will be included in the assessee's total income. That is the clubbing chapter. If you remember, that time we studied this section 10 subsection 32. So that is what I have repeated over here. So basically, income of a minor child, okay, so whatever the minor child will earn, it will be considered as income of other sources, but the exemption is available under section 10 subsection 32. I hope this is quite clear to you all. Okay students, so now let's move on to point number 19. Point number 19 says that interest on compensation or enhanced compensation. So basically, if an assessee receives an interest on the compensation or an enhanced compensation, okay, then the expenses for this interest will be allowed ad hoc at the rate 15%. So for example, if the interest on this enhanced compensation or the compensation has been received of rupees 1 lakh, then an ad hoc expense will be allowed of rupees 50,000, that is 50% of the interest amount. That means only 50,000 will be considered as income from other sources. I hope this is quite clear. Point number 19. Okay, so let's move on to point number 20. Point number 20 says that if MPs, MLAs, MLC, that means the politician, and if they are earning an income, which income? If they are earning a salary income, then it will be fully taxable. Okay, but if they are earning a daily allowances, that is daily constitutional allowances, then it will be fully exempt. I hope this is quite clear to you all. So let's revise this point. Point number 20 says that if an MP, MLA or MLC receives an income of a salary, then it will be fully taxable. But if it receives a daily constitutional allowances, then it will be fully exempt. I hope this is quite clear to you all. Okay. Okay student, now come on to the next page. Over here we are going to study our next section, that is section 56 subsection 2 subsection 7b. In this section what we are going to study, we are going to study that if a private limited company receives an excess consideration at the time of issue of the shares, then whatever excess consideration is received by this private limited company at the time of issue of the shares, such excess consideration will be considered as the income of this private limited company, okay, and it will be chargeable under the head income from other sources. I hope this is quite clear. So now let's read the particulars given under this section, that is section 56 subsection 2 subsection 7b. Okay, this section says that consideration received in excess of fair market value of the shares issued by a closely held company. A closely held company means a private limited company. Okay, so let's understand till here. Okay, if a private limited company is receiving a consideration in excess of what? In excess of a fair market value of the shares, okay, then such excess consideration will be treated as the income of such company where the shares are issued at the premium. So let's understand with an example. Okay, if ABC Private Limited is there, okay, and this company is issuing 1 lakh number of shares. I hope this is quite clear. The fair market value of the shares of this ABC Private Limited company is rupees 80 per shares, okay, but the actual share issue price is rupees 100 per shares. So that means you can identify that the actual share issue price is at a premium as compared to the fair market value of the share. So this is what this section is trying to tell. Okay, if a company, that is a private limited company, is issuing its share and such shares are issued at a price which is higher than the fair market value, then the difference between these two, that is 100 minus 80, which is equal to 20. This 20 into the number of the shares, that is 1 lakh into rupees 20, is equal to 20 lakhs. This 20 lakhs will be considered as the income of this ABC Private Limited, and this 20 lakhs will be charged under the head income from other sources. Okay, I hope this is quite clear. So now by reading this particulars, you can automatically interpret this example. I hope this is quite clear. So this is the formula. The formula says that income from other sources is equal to number of shares issued into actual share issue price minus fair market value of the shares. So the number of shares issued is 1 lakh, okay, into actual share issue price is 100 and the fair market value of the share is 80. That means the income from other sources is 20 lakh. I hope this is quite clear. But if the actual share price, okay, this actual share price is less than this fair market value of the shares, then we need to ignore this section, because this section will apply only when the actual share price is more than equal to fair market value of the share. I hope this is quite clear to you all. Okay students, so now let's understand our next section, that is section 56 subsection 2 subsection 10. This section 56 subsection 2 subsection 10 says that in case of a purchase, we are talking about what? We are talking about purchase. Okay, here a particular assessee will not earn any income. Here basically a particular assessee is making an expense or making a capital expenditure, that is purchase of an immovable property, and such purchase of immovable property is done at an inadequate consideration. Okay, is done at what consideration? Inadequate consideration. Then this formula will apply. After understanding this formula, we will understand this chart, because in order to understand this chart, we need to understand this formula first. So let's read it again. As per section 56 subsection 2 subsection 10, in case of a purchase of an immovable property at the rate inadequate consideration, then the formula will apply. The formula says that if the difference between the SDV, that is the stamp duty value of the immovable property, and the actual consideration, that is the actual value of the consideration paid for that immovable property, is more than below, that is 5% of the actual consideration paid, or rupees 50,000, whichever is higher, then the difference of the stamp duty valuation authority and the actual value paid will be taken as income of other sources. So let's understand only this part with the help of an example. So understand that Mr. A is purchasing a flat, okay, that is a house property and it is also a property, from Mr. B. Okay, Mr. A is paying Mr. B rupees 80 lakhs for this flat. I hope this is quite clear. But the stamp duty valuation authority, okay, values this property at the rate rupees 1 crore. Okay, I hope this is quite clear. So you can see there is a difference between the actual consideration paid and the stamp duty valuation authority's value for this flat. I hope this is quite clear. Since there is a difference, that means the government, that is income tax department, is thinking that this house property purchased by Mr. A from Mr. B is purchased at an inadequate consideration, because he has actually paid 80 lakhs and the stamp duty valuation authority is valuing it at rupees 1 crore. I hope that is quite clear. So if this is the case, then our formula will apply. Our formula says that the difference between SDV and the actual consideration, okay, which is equal to, let's find that out, which is equal to 1 crore minus 80 lakhs, which is equal to 20 lakhs. Okay, so if this 20 lakhs is more than the formula, what is the formula? The formula is 5% of the actual consideration paid will be compared with rupees 50,000, and out of this two, whichever will be higher will be compared over here. I hope this is quite clear. So let's calculate that 5% of the actual consideration, that is 5% of 80 lakhs, which comes to around 4 lakhs, okay, and 50,000, whichever is higher of this two is 4 lakhs. So this 4 lakhs will be compared over here and we will write 4 lakhs over here, okay, and we will see whether this 20 lakhs is more than this or not. Yes, 20 lakhs is more than this 4 lakhs. Then what our condition says is, that the difference of SDV and the actual value paid will be taken as income from other sources of the purchaser, okay, of the purchaser. So let's come to our blank page. Here we have calculated that the difference between stamp duty value and the actual consideration is 20 lakh. Therefore rupees 20 lakhs will be considered as income of Mr. A, and such income will be charged under the head of income from other sources. I hope this is quite clear. If you want to copy this example, you can copy it, but I want to give you a glimpse why this particular section came into existence. Okay, so if you have copied, I'll move on to our next explanation. I hope you all have already copied this part. Okay, so let's understand why this particular section 56 subsection 2 subsection 10 came into picture. So basically there were assessees who were behaving mischievously. What they were doing was, so for example, understand this is our Mr. X, okay. This Mr. X wants to purchase, okay, wants to purchase a house property, okay. So basically, this Mr. X is a bad person, okay, is a bad person, and he is purchasing the property from Y. This is seller, okay. This seller has a house property. The value of this house property is say rupees 1 crore, okay. But Mr. X says to Mr. Y that he does not have white money, okay. That means he does not have the money which he has earned in a rightful manner, okay. That's why he will pay Mr. Y in this manner, okay. In this manner means he will pay 50 lakhs by bank transfer, okay. This is the money that he has earned with a rightful means, and 50 lakhs with cash. That is, he has earned this 50 lakhs with a wrongful means. That's why he's saying that I'll definitely pay you 1 crore. He's telling this Mr. Y, I'll pay you this 1 crore, okay, but I'll pay you in this manner. Mr. Y says okay. If Mr. Y agrees to this particular adjustment, then Mr. Y will be chargeable to income from capital gain, okay. How we will be chargeable to income from capital gain, that we will understand when we will study income from capital gain chapter. But now let's understand why this particular provision, this part came into picture. So let's understand that if Mr. X is purchasing Mr. Y's property for rupees 1 crore, but Mr. Y is receiving the money from Mr. X in this manner, 50 lakhs by bank and 50 lakhs in cash, then the government says that since the Mr. X has earned entire 1 crore, he is showing only his income to as rupees 50 lakhs, and he is not showing this rupees 50 lakhs that he is having in cash as his income. So that means that he had only paid a income tax on this 50 lakhs or whatever income that he is showing, okay, and not on this remaining cash part, okay, which can be called as a black money. So the government says that we will consider the calculation as per section 56 subsection 2 subsection 10. We will find out the value of the house property owned by Mr. Y with the help of Stamp Duty Valuation Authority, okay. So the Stamp Duty Valuation Authority gave a value of rupees 90 lakhs, okay, gave a value of rupees 90 lakhs to the income tax department, okay. So this 90 lakhs will be compared with this actual consideration paid. Basically this 50 lakhs is only the actual consideration paid to Mr. Y in books, okay, in books, but in reality he has already paid him 50 lakhs cash, which is a black money, okay. So income tax have no idea about this particular thing. So they are saying even if Mr. A has purchased the house property at rupees 50 lakh, but our Stamp Duty Valuation Authority thinks that the value of the house property should be 90 lakhs. Since you have purchased this house property at 50 lakhs and the actual value should have been 90 lakhs, this means that you have purchased this house property at a lesser value. So we will consider the difference between this two as your income, okay. We will consider the difference between this two as your income if the formula applies. The formula says that stamp duty value minus actual consideration, okay, actual consideration, which is equal to 90 lakhs minus 50 lakhs, which is equal to 40 lakhs. If this 40 lakhs is greater than the formula, then this 40 lakhs will be considered as the income of Mr. X. I hope this is quite clear to you all, okay. Since we are aware that this 40 lakhs will be any which ways greater than this formula, that means this 40 lakhs will considered as the income of Mr. X, okay, under the head income from house property. So we will calculate the formula also, but for the saying I told you the entire thing, okay. So the formula says that the formula's value is 5% of actual consideration, okay, which is equal to 5% of 50 lakhs, which is equal to 2,50,000 and rupees 50,000, okay. So this rupees 50,000 will be compared with this, whichever will be higher will be written over here. So the in place of formula we will write 2,50,000. Since you can see that this difference, that is the stamp duty value and the actual consideration value difference, that is 40 lakhs, is more than this 2,50,000, the entire 40 lakh will be considered as the income of the assessee, that is Mr. X, under the head income from other sources. I hope this is quite clear to you all. I hope this explanation was worth. So we have understood this part. Okay, so we have to understand this chart also. What is this chart? This charts help us to find out the stamp duty value, okay, on which date the stamp duty value should be considered. Okay, so with the help of this chart we will able to identify on which date the stamp duty value we have to consider. Okay, so the first part of the chart says that if the date of the agreement and the registration is same, then the stamp duty value as on the date of the registration will be considered, okay, for calculating inadequate consideration. So let's understand that what they are trying to say. Okay, so basically in real life what happens, Mr. A wants to purchase house property of Mr. B. Okay, so they make an agreement first. Okay, they make an agreement to purchase house property. Okay, after this agreement is made, the basic thing they will do is they will register this agreement. Okay, and after registering the agreement, Mr. A will file for registration of the house property in his name. Okay, so agreement date was say 1st April 2019 and the date of filing is 30th September 2019. So the stamp duty value can be different on this both the dates. Okay, so that is what it is given over here. If the date of the agreement and the registration is same, then the stamp duty as on the date of registration will be considered. But if the date of the agreement and the registration is not same, so that is what our example was, the date of agreement and the date of registering the property are two different dates, that is 1st April and 30th September. Okay, then since there is a two different date, then which date stamp duty value should be considered? Either the date of 1st April stamp duty value should be considered or the 30th September stamp duty value should be considered. So that is what we will study over here. So if the date of the agreement and the registration is not the same, then if on the date of the agreement part or whole of the amount is paid by account payee check, bank draft, ECS or through such other electronic mode as prescribed, then the stamp duty value on the date of the agreement will be taken. So as I told you, agreement comes first and then the registration happened. Okay, so there is a very rare possibility that the agreement and the registration date of the house property are same. Okay, in real life this scenario only happens because you meet the buyer, you make an agreement with him, you pay a part amount of rupees say 50,000 in order to ask Mr. B to not sell this house property to someone else. That's why you pay him a token amount of rupees 50,000. So this 50,000 is considered as this part amount is paid by the assessee by way of account payee check, bank draft, ECS or through other electronic mode as may be prescribed. Okay, if you pay this rupees 50,000 which is a token money in cash, this will not be considered as a valid date in order to consider stamp duty value. Okay, stamp duty value will be considered of the agreement date only if you have paid a part or a whole of the amount and such part or the whole of the amount is paid by way of account payee check, bank draft, ECS or through such other electronic mode as may be prescribed. In short, government is asking you to show the proof that you have actually paid the part of the amount or whole of the amount on the agreement date. Okay, so if you pass a check or if you give a bank draft or if you make an electronic payment, then there will be a particular proof that you have made a payment on the agreement date. So if this is such, then the stamp duty value on the date of the agreement will be taken. I hope this is quite clear. But if the assessee has made a part payment, okay, on the agreement date by way of cash, that is otherwise, then the stamp duty value will be taken as on the date of the registration, that is of this date. I hope this is quite clear. So basically why this case was brought into picture, see, 1st April 2019 is an earlier date than that of 30th September 2019. So there is a high possibility that on 1st April 2019 the stamp duty value of the house property will be lower, okay, will be lower than as compared to this date. I hope this is quite clear, because as in when the time moves, okay, the price of the property increases, so the stamp duty value of the property will also increase. That's why many of the times the assessee makes an agreement and on this agreement they make a part payment, okay, by way of check or by way of a bank draft or by ECS or through any such other electronic mode as may be prescribed, so that the stamp duty value of the date of agreement will be considered. Okay, I hope this is quite clear. And this last point is from the TDS chapter. Okay, you won't understand it right now. When we will study TDS chapter, that time again I'll come back over here and I'll explain you this part. In order to keep the notes complete of this section 56 subsection to subsection 10, I have written this note over here. I hope this is quite clear. So let's revise this section, that is section 56 subsection to subsection 10. Okay, this section says that in case of a purchase of an immovable property at an inadequate consideration, then the formula will apply. The formula says that if a difference between the stamp duty value and the actual value of a consideration paid is more than below, that is 5% of the actual consideration paid, or rupees 50,000, whichever is higher, then the difference of the stamp duty value and the actual value paid for the purchasing of the house property will be taken as income of other sources under the books of the purchaser. Okay, from the buyer's point of view, in the books of the buyer, that is the purchaser. I hope this is quite clear to you all. Okay, so the formula is income from other sources under section 56 subsection to subsection 10, that is stamp duty value minus consideration paid. I hope this is quite clear. How to calculate the stamp duty value? If the date of the agreement and the registration is same for that house property, then the stamp duty value as on the date of registration will be considered for calculating inadequate consideration. But if the date of the agreement and the registration is not same, as per our example that we have seen over here, then if on the date of agreement part or whole of the amount is paid by the account payee check or bank draft, ECS, or through such other electronic mode as prescribed, then stamp duty value on the date of the agreement will be taken. I hope this is quite clear. Otherwise, stamp duty value will be taken as on the date of registration. I hope this is quite clear to you, and this is a part of TDS. So our section 56 subsection 2 subsection 10 comes to an end. Okay students, so now come to the next page. On this next page we are going to study our next section, that is section 2 subsection 22, which talks about dividend including deemed dividend. So what is dividend? Dividend is simply something that is distributed by the company to the shareholders. So when the dividend is distributed to the shareholders of the company, in the shareholders hand, this dividend, okay, is exempt under section 10 subsection 34 up to rupees 10 lakhs. I hope this is quite clear. Over and above this 10 lakhs, if the dividend has been received, then it is taxable as per section 115 BBDA at the rate 10%. I hope you all remember this. We have studied in this chapter only. Okay, but if the company is trying to act smart and it is not distributing dividend in the form of money, but they are trying to distribute the dividend in a kind, that is in some other way other than money, then they think it will not be considered as deemed dividend. Okay, so that's why this deemed dividend concept was brought into by the Income Tax Act. Okay, so what they are trying to say is, to the extent of the accumulated profit of the company, following will be considered as deemed dividend. Okay, so this A, B, C, D, they are not a serial number, they are the subsections. So how to read this? Section 2 subsection 22 subsection A says that if a company distributes out of the accumulated profits of the company any dividend, it will be considered as the dividend issued by the company. Okay, but if the company distributes any of the assets of the company and such assets are distributed up to the accumulated profits of the company, okay, then such distribution of the assets will be considered as the deemed dividend, and such deemed dividend will also get an exemption under section 10 subsection 34, and section 115 BBDA will be still applicable to such deemed dividend. Okay, I hope I have created a base. Now let's understand it again. Okay, section 2 subsection 22 talks about dividend including deemed dividend. Okay, if a company is distributing a dividend other than the way of money, and they are trying to distribute the dividend in a form of asset, in a form of a debentures or a deposit certificate, or in any other manner, okay, then the dividend they are trying to distribute, that is they are trying to distribute a deemed dividend, okay, then to the extent of the accumulated profits of the company, following will be considered as deemed dividend. That means if a company has an accumulated profit of say rupees 100 lakhs, okay, and they are distributing the assets of rupees 200 lakhs, okay, to the shareholder. I hope this is quite clear. Then the assets up to rupees 100 lakhs will be considered as deemed dividend, okay, and not the entire 200 lakhs will be considered as deemed dividend. I hope this is quite clear, because the actual accumulated profit is only 100 lakhs. I hope this is quite clear to you all. So let me erase this and let's understand it again. Okay, so what does section 2 subsection 22 subsection A says that if a company is trying to distribute any money that is out of accumulated profit or distribute any assets of the company, then to the extent of the accumulated profits of the company, following will be considered as deemed dividend. I hope this is quite clear. So let's understand our next section, that is section 2 subsection 22 subsection B says that if a company is distributing the debentures or the deposit certificates to the shareholders or the bonus share to the preference shareholders to the extent of the accumulated profits of the company, following will be considered as deemed dividend. I hope this is quite clear to you all. So the next section, that is section 2 subsection 22 subsection C says that if a company is distributing to the shareholders on the account of the liquidation of the company, then to the extent of the accumulated profits of the company, following will be considered as deemed dividend. I hope this is quite clear to you all. Then as per section 2 subsection 22 subsection D, if a company is trying to distribute to the shareholders on the reduction of the share capital of the company, then to the extent of the accumulated profit of the company, following will be considered as deemed dividend. So basically deemed dividend is also considered as dividend. Okay, so that means under section 10 subsection 34's exemption is also allowed to deemed dividend, as well 115 BBDA provision, that is 10% tax rate, is also applicable to this deemed dividend up to subsection D. I hope this is quite clear to you all. Okay, so the note says that dividend slash interim dividend or dividend referred under section 2 subsection 22 subsection A to section 2 subsection 22 subsection D are exempt under section 1034 subject to section 115 BBDA provision. So that is what we have studied over here. Okay students, so now let's move on to our next section, that is section 2 subsection 22 subsection E. Okay, in this section what we are going to study is if a private limited company is giving a loans or advances to its shareholders, and to which shareholders, a shareholder who is holding 10% of equity shares in this private limited company, then the loans or advances given to the shareholders to the extent of accumulated profit, it will be considered as deemed dividend. I hope this is quite clear to you all. So let's read this particulars. Loans advances by a private limited company to its shareholders. I hope you have understood which shareholders. A shareholder who is holding 10% of equity share in this private limited company. I hope this is quite clear. So that is what only I have written in the bracket. Who is a beneficiary owner of the equity share holding not less than 10% of the voting power. Or if the loans or advances are given by this private limited company to a concern means a company or a firm or a LLP, okay, in which such shareholder have a substantial interest. So what does substantial interest mean? Substantial interest means this particular shareholder is having a control over this concern, that is a company, a firm or a LLP, or this shareholder is receiving more than 20% of the profits from this concern. I hope this is quite clear to you all. Okay, so let's read this again. Loans advances by a private limited company given to a concern in which such shareholder is having a substantial interest to the extent of the accumulated profit, it will be considered as deemed dividend. That means let's understand it in detail now. Let's come into a blank page. Okay, so if a company, okay, is giving a loan slash advances to a shareholder holding 10% of equity shares. Okay, so this is our shareholder Mr. Y. Okay, this is our shareholder Mr. Y who is holding 10% equity share, and a private limited company has given a loan, okay, to this shareholder. So whatever loan has been given to the shareholder up to the accumulated profit, it will be considered as deemed dividend. Okay, deemed dividend under section 2 subsection 22 subsection E. Similarly, if these loans or advances are given to a company, okay, or to a firm or to a LLP, in this Mr. Y, okay, Mr. Y who is holding 10% of the equity share is having a substantial interest, then whatever these loans or advances have been given to this company, firm or LLP in which Mr. Y is having a substantial interest, it will be considered as deemed dividend received by Mr. Y only. Okay, in this case also it will be considered as Mr. Y is receiving a deemed dividend from this private limited company up to the extent of the accumulated profit. I hope this is quite clear to you all by now. Okay, so that is what only it is given in this particulars. Loans advanced by a private limited company to its shareholders or a concern in which such shareholder is having a substantial interest to the extent of accumulated profit, it will be considered as deemed dividend, and such deemed dividends income, okay, will be considered in the hands of the shareholder only, even if it is given to a concern in which the shareholder is having a substantial interest. I hope this is quite clear. So let's read the note. The note says that deemed dividend under section 2 subsection 22 subsection E is fully exempt under section 10 subsection 34 without the applicability of the section 115 BBDA, that is more than rupees 10 lakhs deemed dividend under section 2 subsection 22 subsection E is fully exempt under section 10 subsection 34. That means even if 20 lakhs deemed dividend is given under section 2 subsection 22 subsection E to the shareholder, okay, then the entire 20 lakhs will be allowed as exemption under section 10 subsection 34. I hope this is quite clear to you. So all the important provision of income from other sources chapter comes to an end. Okay, so this is the miscellaneous part. Expenses related to income from other sources. If an assessee is earning an income and such income falls under the head of income from other sources, then whether an expense can be reduced from such income, is there any possibility? That is what we are studying over here. So winnings and casual income basically falls under the head income from other sources. So whether any expense relating to such income from other sources can be allowed? So the answer is no. If an income is winning or a casual income, no expense is allowed as deduction from such income. Okay, entire income will be taxable at the rate 30% under section 115 BB. That is what the section we have studied for this casual income. Then if an assessee is earning an exempt income, that is in income under section 10, then whether any expenses can be allowed as deduction from such income, the answer is no expense will be allowed as deduction from such income. I hope this is quite self-explanatory. Okay, so now let's understand the last part, that is other taxable income. So if an assessee is earning an income which is taxable under the head income from other sources, okay, then whether such income which is earning under the head income from other sources and which is taxable also, then whether the expenses relating to such other taxable income can be reduced from this other taxable income, the answer is yes. Full expenses is allowed as deduction from the income. I hope this is quite clear to you all. Okay, and the last note of this chapter says that any other income not covered under any other head of income, then such income will be covered under the head income from other sources. I hope this is quite clear. This was our smallest head of income, income from other sources. I hope this is quite clear to you all. Okay. I would like to request to the students who are new to this channel to subscribe to this channel, and the students who are already subscribed to this channel and who are also new to this channel, kindly hit a like button to all my videos whichever you are viewing. This will help YouTube to recognize that this particular lectures are good enough, and it will push it to the maximum audience as much as possible. And I would also request you all to share the video lectures, the playlist of my video lectures, to all of your friends who are connected with the CA course. Above here you can see a mobile number besides the UPI apps. So what is this? So basically earlier when I used to teach on YouTube for free of cost, few students used to contact me and used to tell me that, sir, I want to appreciate you in a monetary terms. Please give us your account number so that we can make a monetary contribution to you. So that time I wasn't sure to give them my account details, and that time the UPI apps were also not so much in popular. So that's why they were safe or not, that was also a concern. But after this COVID and the lockdown, the UPI is being commonly used by everyone. So if you want to make a monetary contribution to me, you can make it over here. And I would also request you, if you are making any monetary contribution to me, please send me a screenshot of that so that I can recognize who have made a monetary contribution to me, and I can appreciate them on my social media handles over here, including the YouTube, in my video lectures. And whatever the contribution you are making to this UPI number, it is at your will. There is nothing dramatic about that you have to make a contribution to me. The video lectures are completely free, as well as the notes, and the format book is also free. You can download it from the Telegram group. Just you need to do is you need to join the Telegram group, and from there you can download it. I hope you all make the full use of the video lectures and the direct tax playlist along with the notes as well as the format book, and secure an exemption in CA IPC paper 4 taxation. And I would like to wish you all the best for your future.